anything goes wrong, if people who lost their jobs are angry, the company can say, well, we were just following the experts. And McKinsey can say, we don't run your company, we just make recommendations, we just make PowerPoints.
Are you on? Which side are you on?
Mention about the McKinsey. That's what we're going to be talking to Gabriella Spielberg about. And, you know, amid the state of Alabama's frenzied campaign against the UAW during the Mercedes union election, some news slipped out that has gone rather unremarked on. That is that the state is creating a new strategic economic plan. And to do this, they have hired management consulting firm McKinsey & Company. As far as I can tell, there has only even been one article about this, and that article being in WBHM under the headline, Alabama to begin working with a consulting company that's under criminal investigation. So if that concerns you, it should. But despite the fact that McKinsey is currently under criminal investigation, spokespersons for the state said that they maintain, quote, full confidence in McKinsey, and no one else in the media in the state has mentioned it. So, to try to right that wrong and explain to folks just how very bad McKinsey is and why it should concern you that they are being hired for the project of basically creating Alabama's economy for who knows how much, by the way, we have on the line Gabriella Spielberg. Gabriella Spielberg is a freelance journalist who recently did a video for More Perfect Union about the management consulting firm McKinsey, and she joins us now. Gabby, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Really excited to talk to you about this, and what I wanted to start off our interview with playing for you the clip that alerted me to the fact that Alabama's new economy is going to be shaped by McKinsey. This was an interview that Commerce Department Secretary Ellen McNair did on Capital Journal, which is kind of one of the state's premier political television programs, also on public television in Alabama, might I add, and it was very frustrating.
It literally films at the State House, like
yes,
in the basement
yeah.
of the State House. Like,
so
it is, yeah.
Our tax dollars pay for this, and the vast majority of this interview was just the Commerce Secretary saying how bad unions are, and Capital Journal did not give the union or union supporters the opportunity to respond. So I just love the fact that my tax dollars went to fund anti-union propaganda without even a right of response. That's fantastic. I love it, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. So let's play this clip where Ellen McNair references the fact that we have hired McKinsey to shape Alabama's economy.
Well, I saw the other day that y'all and the governor announced the development of a new strategy.
Right.
It wasn't in the announcement of a strategy. You're saying basically we're going to take months to develop one. Talk about that. What goes into that, and what is the goal?
Sure. So the one thing that Governor Ivey asked me to do as I joined this team is to develop a new strategic plan for economic development for the state. So the last plan was done in 2012.
Is that the Accelerate Alabama?
Accelerate Alabama, and then it was adjusted and modified a little bit in 2016. So the world has changed a good bit in those years. So it really is time to do another approach. So that's a big job in trying to really understand the complexities of where we are and really predicting the future. It's a big challenge. It's a big job to do. So what the governor announced last week is the hiring of the consultants, and that is the first step. So that core team that we discussed, really developed a strategy and a time frame. I had a deadline that I told Governor Ivey that I would give her our process by the end of March, which is what I did. We have hired McKinsey & Company, world-class consultant, to do the quantitative piece. World-class consultant.
All right, there we go. McKinsey & Company, world-class consultants hired to shape Alabama's economy. So, we're going to give some examples of why McKinsey is bad, why you should be concerned. But I think the first question that is going to be on most people's mind is Jake, what the hell are you talking about? What is McKinsey? What is management consult? What are you talking about? So, Gabby, can you tell us, what am I talking about? What's McKinsey?
Yeah, so McKinsey is a consulting firm, and what is consulting is a question that most people have because it is very, very opaque. And McKinsey specifically are management consultants, which is different from, say, more specialized consultants like engineering consultants or technical consultants. Management consultants means that they work with, CEOs and bosses, management of companies. So that is really clear whose side of things they're on, right? When we're talking about how things affect labor. And they go in sort of the way that they talk about themselves is that they solve problems, right? Oh, I'm a CEO. I'm not getting enough sales. I'm not making enough profit margin. Call in McKinsey. They're going to run the numbers. They're going to tell me what I should be doing with my business to make more money for management.
I see. So they are not concerned typically with making the job better, with getting workers more money, with making sure the job is safer, or making sure that consumers get a good product.
No, they're absolutely not concerned about those things. They may say that they're concerned about those things, but their actions show otherwise. In fact, the author of a book on them, the firm, Duff McDonald, called them the single greatest legitimizer of mass layoffs than anyone anywhere at any time in modern history. So that is really a big part of their MO is mass layoffs.
And, just to kind of expand on that, I think in your video, and I would encourage folks to go and watch the video. There's going to be some things that we don't talk about that are in that video from More Perfect Union. Go to More Perfect Union on YouTube and find the video about McKinsey. It's great. But one of the stories that you highlighted in that video was about McKinsey's consulting with Disney. And some of the questions that they asked, particularly around safety, were just kind of baffling to me. Can you explain what, why Disney reached out to McKinsey and what some of the recommendations were that McKinsey gave to Disney?
Yeah, so they were hired by a Disney park in, I believe, the 90s. And from that park's conception in the 60s all the way up until the 90s and early 2000s, it was very, very safe. They had totally minimal accidents. And the reason for that was because they had maintenance staff who were checking things all the time. They had a large maintenance staff. They had people working around the clock, and they were going around just doing really routine stuff. They were checking, safety features on rides like the seat belts and the lap bars and stuff. And just making sure everything was smooth. Oh, a little, a nut is loose. Let's tighten that. And McKinsey came in. They were hired by Disney, and Disney really wanted to increase corporate profit. They were looking for shareholder value in this, partnership with McKinsey. And they said, how can we make more money? And McKinsey always looks at how you can save more money, spend less money. And the quickest way to do that is to cut labor. So labor is always the first thing to go, or one of the first things to go. And they said, hey, why are you paying this huge maintenance staff when your rides are totally safe and they don't malfunction? What are we doing? And as you may have already guessed, that's kind of silly logic, because the reason that the rides weren't failing was because they were being checked. But they significantly reduced their maintenance staff. They moved a lot of people to the graveyard shift, meaning like overnight shifts. And that was really, really difficult for the staff that they retained. And then, of course, stuff starts falling apart. And then they had a number of accidents following those changes where, maintenance issues and staffing were cited in all of those accidents.
And that's just one example. You mentioned that they were the kind of greatest legitimizer of mass layoffs ever. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Before we move on to that, What were the ramifications of that? What happened? I don't want to miss that. What happened as they kind of scaled back their safety program?
Yeah, so there were, we talk about in our video, there were 3 deaths that happened. One was of a child, one was of the parents of a child, or one parent of a child, and another was of a young adult on a roller coaster.
And so that's kind of the stuff that happens when you hire people like this, and when you hire people that are their training is to maximize profit as opposed to maximize, the goodness of the product or things like this. And, one of the manifestations of that is laying people off, trying to get fewer workers to do more work. And, this came out of, there was, as wages increased and as CEO pay increased, somebody, they started noticing, oh no, workers are making more money, or workers are increasing at a faster rate than CEOs. Their compensation was increasing at a faster rate than CEOs. And, there were people that thought that were a problem. But it seems like one of the things
and those people were the CEOs.
Right. Those people were the CEOs. Yeah, it was not the workers. The workers did not really have a problem with that. And, as the CEOs saw a problem with that, one of the things that you point to about the relationship of these consulting firms is they really allow each party to kind of push blame off. Right? And so the CEOs, they bring in these consulting firms, and look, it's the consulting firms that are saying that we would be a more profitable company if we lay you all off. So, look, I'm just doing what the experts tell me is in the best interest of the company. And it just happens that the best interest of the company is for me to make twice as much money next year and for me to lay off half of you, right? And so talk to us about that relationship and how they kind of, the companies pawn off responsibility on these out of state special interest groups is something that we would say, kind of in political speak, but out of the company interest groups, and how then also the consulting firms pawn responsibility off on the companies, so talk to us about that.
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest issues that I see with McKinsey is they have this relationship that's very mutually beneficial, right? Kind of a symbiotic relationship between the management of large corporations and McKinsey, where management can say, we want to make more money. And, the ways to do that, sometimes they're creative solutions. Sometimes it's just laying everybody off, right? Sometimes it's very simple. And they say, we want to do this thing. McKinsey says, okay, we'll come and help you. And then McKinsey gives them that legitimization. They say, here's a PowerPoint. We've run all the numbers. Here's our spreadsheets. Laying people off is going to be the best thing to do. And the company's going to say, okay, great. And then if anything goes wrong, if, people who lost their jobs are angry, or you have, safety or quality issues start to ensue, then you have the company can say, well, we were just following recommendations of the experts. And McKinsey can say, we don't run your company. We just make recommendations. We just make PowerPoints. And so nobody is ever really on the hook.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
And what's interesting to me, and this might be controversial, is to my knowledge, the state of Alabama isn't actually a company whose purpose is to generate profit. So I'm curious how these tactics apply to a government. And to be clear, I think McKinsey is bad for corporations too. Mm-hmm. But it also seems like it would be especially bad for an entity that isn't actually supposed to generate profit. So I don't know if you have any insight or how you think it's going to apply to Alabama or a state.
Totally. That's a great question, because it is different when we're talking about companies that are looking to make profit and the government that is not looking necessarily to make profit, but they are looking to, do certain things, and they have, financial goals. And the major difference there is that they're going not to be looking for how to increase profit, but they are going to still be looking at how to cut costs. And when we look at, they do a lot of work with governments, just to sort of give some background. They work with many, state and city governments in the United States. They work with the federal government in the United States, and they work for many foreign governments as well. They've worked extensively in Australia, Canada, China, and Saudi Arabia, just to name a few. But that's definitely not all. France as well.
Right, right. And one of the things that they're able to do is I think kind of sugarcoat the bad policies that the companies want to implement. So Barbara in the chat said, Dr. Mad said, my school district didn't cut positions. We, quote, adopted a new staffing ratio. And I think some of that kind of executive speak is one of the things that they pay McKinsey millions of dollars for. And speaking of their, involvement with governments as well as corporations, we started off with highlighting the fact that McKinsey is under criminal investigation. And my understanding is that is due to their involvement in the opioid crisis, and particularly the fact that they were both advising the FDA and Purdue, right?
Yeah. So they were advising Purdue Pharma, the biggest producer of opioids, and the FDA at the same time. And this was not necessarily a fluke. This was sort of standard practice for them, where they would work for both a company making something that is regulated, say tobacco or opioids, and the government entity that regulates them at the same time. And they would say, we have separate teams doing everything. So there's totally firewalls in between all of these different projects. But it came out that not only were there not firewalls between these projects, they had some of the same individual people working on both of those projects. And when they went to the FDA, they'd be like, yeah, we'll work for you. And when they went to these companies of regulated substances, they'd say, we will work for you and we can help you because we work for the FDA. We know the ins and outs of the FDA. And that was a selling point for them in getting clients like Purdue, they worked for many, many years for Philip Morris Tobacco. They even worked for Juul, the producer of vapes. Yeah.
Right. And now, one thing about McKinsey is that, because they are so invested in kind of their philosophy is executing, ideas and priorities for companies and corporations and governments, they must be very cheap, right? Because, theoretically, a government or a corporation could just hire, a business person and, 22-year-old business grad themselves and have them on staff. But instead, they're hiring a whole other corporation to do this consulting work. So McKinsey must be very cost effective for the kind of work that they do, right?
No, they are not. McKinsey is very, very expensive.
What? You're kidding.
McKinsey projects are generally in the millions of dollars. It depends a lot on the project and the scope of that. But, we're looking at projects from $2 million to $100 million for government work most of the time.
And I think one of the good illustrations of just how much they cost, and then also we can talk about how it was not cost effective. Even though they paid all of these millions of dollars, the policies that they executed at the encouragement of McKinsey were ultimately bad for the state. Was the state of Illinois? Can you talk to us about McKinsey's introduction to Illinois? I think there's some kind of interesting strategy there with, I don't know if you would call it a loss leader or whatever, but there was they did some work for Illinois and then they just kept doing work for Illinois and the costs kept increasing. So can you talk to us about that, their relationship with that state?
Yes. So when they began their relationship with the state of Illinois, they did do it for free. And they said, we'll help you. No problem. don't worry about it. We're going to come in, we're going to help you restructure Medicaid. And they did that. They got their foot in the door. This was in the 1990s. But this was sort of a resume builder for them. And from there, they started getting more and more expensive contracts. And they have stayed, they still work for the state of Illinois. And this is sort of illustrative of something that happens where they come in, it might be free, they say, we'll help you, no problem. And then they stay for a very long time.
And so what are some of the other things that they've been doing for the state of Illinois since they, well, I guess first, what were the results of that, their work on restructuring Medicaid? You know, I mean, was this really beneficial for the citizens of Illinois? And then what is some of the other work that they've done since then?
Yeah, so the biggest sector of their clients, the clients that make them the most money, is in private health insurance and healthcare conglomerates. They work for Anthem, Aetna, United, you know, lots of companies like that, and many more that we don't even know. And so that shows kind of where their interests lie, right? They're here to help states do Medicaid, but they work for all of the private insurers. So people are, you know, losing Medicaid. But I also want to point out that they don't necessarily, that's not totally one-sided. They work for any client who hires them, right? They don't have a political agenda beyond, you know, their own profit and the profit of their clients. And like, they also worked for Obamacare, which we'll probably talk about later as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out. But yeah, they spent a lot of, or Illinois ended up spending, sorry, I'm looking at my numbers. So a contract was canceled in Illinois later when people started to clock some things that were strange. There was a $63 billion procurement to 7 managed care companies, 4 of which were McKinsey clients. And this money being spent had bypassed the usual oversight that government spending received. An official on the subject said that this proposal was not afforded the same independent oversight as, quote, say, a contract to purchase paper clips.
Wow. Well, you know, that's, and so I think that should really kind of illustrate some of the concerns that we should have with, you know, the idea that McKinsey is going to be, you know, in the driver's seat of really restructuring or you know, structuring Alabama's economy in the future. The idea that, you know, they could be moving bids around to their clients on, you know, bids to the order of tens of billions of dollars. I mean, this is very, very concerning stuff. Talking about some of their other work with the government, with governments, you know, you alluded to Obamacare. So what was their involvement with Obamacare?
Yeah, so I actually don't know the full scope of what their involvement was with Obamacare, but famously, when Obamacare unveiled its website, the website crashed. And then it took a very long time to fix. And McKinsey had been involved in the, you know, website building part of this, which was building, you know, large systems to deal with the data of lots and lots of American citizens, right? We're talking about huge volumes of information. And McKinsey knew that this website was not up to par and probably wasn't going to work, and the government unveiled it anyway, and then it crashed. And that caused a lot of issues with people's enrollment and people's insurance. And they were really involved in that. And the thing that is sort of interesting is that this is another part of their work, is that they always lean on using outside contractors. They're an outside contractor, and when they structure these kinds of programs for governments, that is their first go-to. They also worked in setting up NASA in the 50s, like the organization of NASA, how that organization functions. And they also created this system where they rely on a lot of out-of-house contractors. And what that does is it means that then when something goes wrong with those out-of-house contractors or it becomes expensive, the actual government entity we're looking at doesn't have the capability to do the thing that they need to do. The government entities setting up Obamacare didn't have the capacity to build a good website. They had to go to outside people, and that can cause a lot of problems.
And just to underscore the kind of amorality of McKinsey, I wanted to just really quickly highlight some of the things that we talked about yesterday or the day before, whenever we spoke. You mentioned that they have also done work for ICE, and they made recommendations about the cost, about increasing the cost effectiveness of the administration of ICE and child separation and migrants and things like this, that were so cutthroat that ICE agents refused to carry them out, right? So, I mean, from wherever you're coming from, right? Whether if you're like a lefty and you care about migrants, you're like, oh wow, that's really bad, and then even if you're like a right winger and you love ICE and you love law enforcement, right? I mean, they are more extreme than these people. Like, that's really bonkers. You also highlighted they work for Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
no, go ahead.
Yeah, their whole thing is they say we don't do policy, we just do execution. One of the people we spoke to worked on that project, and he was very young, and he was like, "What? I don't understand. How we're saying we don't do policy, we just do execution." For this thing that's causing a lot of human harm. And so much so that the people who work there every day said, oh, we can't do those things.
Right.
We can't separate families even more than we are just to, increase bed space in these facilities, things like that.
Right. And then, doing work for Saudi Arabia, dictatorial regime, doing work for Philip Morris tobacco companies, responsible for the deaths of a bunch of, a freaking lot of people.
Lots of people. They only
people.
pulled out of the tobacco industry in, I believe, 2022, very recently.
Wow.
Mind you, we've known that smoking causes cancer since about the 1960s.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is just a very shifty company. And I guess I'm kind of winding down as far as, questions that I have, but I wanted to make sure that I give you a chance if there's anything else that you want to talk about McKinsey in particular, and then wrapping up with just a kind of caution that, McKinsey is not the only bad consulting company, right? They're all of these management consulting companies are terrible. We just have more insight into McKinsey because they have had some whistleblowers and people who used to work for them write books about their experience and things like this. So we have more insight into McKinsey, and so that's why when we talk about the evils of management consulting, it's a lot of examples from McKinsey, but listeners should not take this segment as get rid of McKinsey, hire some other freaks, right? So I'll let you I'll let you have the floor there.
Yeah, we picked McKinsey for this project for a variety of reasons, but all of the management consulting companies do very similar things. So keep eyes out if you happen to be looking, if you're skimming through the details and you see things like Accenture, Deloitte, BCG, Bain, there's others, but
Deloitte
those are big
actually
ones
created, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Deloitte actually created the first strategic economic plan, Accelerate Alabama, in 2013. I was reading a little bit from that report, and I saw that name. So yes, so upgraded, I guess.
Interesting, yeah. That is actually really interesting in terms of the difference between these two plans, if you're going to get into that.
What is the difference? Do you know?
I don't know in particular, in part because the information that's been released about the new plan is very, very vague, which is another point that I wanted to bring up. That is, consultants rely on this vague language that I think can make a lot of people feel like they don't understand it because they didn't go to business school, and these are big business words. But a lot of these words are kind of gibberish. You're going to see a lot of words like optimization and right sizing, and what was the one you said before? Ratios.
Adopting new staffing ratios, synergies, things like this. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of things like that, and they frankly don't mean as much as they seem like they do. And that is on purpose. But something I was going to say was, I don't know a lot of the specifics on their contract with Alabama. I don't think a lot of that information is public at this point. But I just wanted to give an example of a government that canceled a contract with McKinsey. And this happened in Austin, Texas. There was a $2 million contract to study a homelessness program. They were going to give $2 million to McKinsey to run data analysis on this stuff. And they ended up canceling it because it was going to study housing units that had not yet been built. And somehow nobody had caught that. And then there were some parties from homelessness nonprofits in the area and the county who said, wait, why are we going to spend $2 million to study something that hasn't been built yet, and with a company that has all of these ethical concerns that's under criminal investigation? And they ended up canceling that contract. So I just wanted to say that because I don't know the details of the Alabama contract specifically, but that is a thing that can happen if the interested parties decide it is not in their interest.
That was great to know. And also it seems like you could just spend $2 million on housing if they are that concerned about homelessness. It's interesting in that clip from Capital Journal. I saw that, and they were trotting out like all the anti-union lines, especially like it's outside agitators coming in. But like McKinsey quite literally is an outside agitator that then brings in new outside agitators until you're like 3 steps removed from the people that are like actually impacted by these plans.
Well, and they're the outside folks that supposedly the conservative movement hates now, right? I mean, these are like Harvard, Yale freaks. You know what I mean? Like, I thought we hated the elites, and now we're bringing in the elites to structure our economy. It's bonkers. Gabby Spielberg, again, freelance journalist, former fellow for More Perfect Union, did this video for More Perfect Union about McKinsey. Really appreciate your time. Anything else before we let you go?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's important to just keep asking questions about these contracts and demanding that those questions be answered by your government. The questions that I personally have are, what are the major differences between the old plan, Accelerate Alabama, and the new plan? And really, what was wrong with the old plan before? Why are we making this change? And I haven't found answers to those questions. I wonder if you or your listeners will find answers to those questions soon.
That's a great point.
Thank you. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Gabby Spielberg, freelance journalist, More Perfect Union. Check out her video, and we will. I'll keep in touch with you as this story unfolds, and we may bring you back for some analysis as more comes out about the plan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.